Hey guys, my name is Vishal and I welcome you all to yet another session by Edureka. In today's session, we would be comparing cloud computing with on-premise architecture. And once we are done with this session, I'm sure that you people would be having a clearer picture as to what suits in your business needs better. Having said that, guys, let's take a look at the offerings of today's session first. So first and foremost, I would start by talking about what do these terms mean. Then I would compare them based on these pointers. We would understand how do these two approaches fare when it comes to cost, how do they fare when it comes to security, control, and finally I would talk about the flexibility part. I'd also put in certain other pointers which I feel are worth discussing. Having said that, guys, let's get started. So what do these approaches mean? First, let's try to understand how on-premise approach works. Now, this approach is nothing but your traditional approach where what happens is all your data, all your applications, they are hosted in-house. As an owner, you actually go ahead and buy licensed software and you take care of security and stuff like that. What it means is you actually go ahead and write your own piece of code and you own your own server. As a company, employees are responsible for monitoring these softwares and also maintaining them, ensuring that these softwares are deployed properly. All these things they happen in-house. Now this is an important point. Whether you talk about having your servers, scaling those servers, making changes to the compute capacity, your storage capacity, whether you're talking about monitoring these applications, dealing with customer issues and all those things. I mean, you take care of these things in-house. That means at your on-premise architecture. Now let's try to understand cloud computing approach as well. So when it comes to cloud computing approach, this is what the bookish definition has to say. It is a huge space online which holds a stack of servers which are orchestrated to provide you with various services like database, storage, whether you're talking about computation, compliance, security, analytics, and many other services. For people who are completely new to cloud computing, they might wonder what is this person exactly talking about. Well, let's try to simplify this definition a little more. I just mentioned few terms like huge space online and collection of servers and their orchestration, right? So to compare this, I'm going to give you an analogy where I'm going to talk about electricity. Now, we all consume electricity, right? Whether you're at home, whether you're at your office, we have lights, we have TV sets, we have air conditioners, hair dryers, your laptops, everything needs electricity. So what we do is we probably just consume the electricity that comes at our place. And at the end of the month, what we do is we pay the bill for the electricity we consume for the number of units that we've consumed, right? So who actually provides this electricity to us? It is our electricity provider. But we normally do not put in a lot of thought as in how is this electricity provided to our place, who maintains it, what happens when it goes down and stuff like that. If you know about these things, it's not a big concern for you. Your concern is consuming electricity and maybe at the end of the month just paying them the bill for the services that you use. So what cloud computing does is it gives you all these facilities when it comes to computing. When we talked about on-premise approach, everything there happened in-house. Here, what happens is when it comes to taking care of computation part or when it comes to building software, maintaining your applications, what we do is we actually go ahead and bring in a third party vendor who basically provides you with all these services that is computation, storage, database, monitoring, security, so that all you have to do is focus on your business needs. And what you do here is you pay for these services as you use these services. So this approach is called as cloud computing. Now, when I talk about cloud, we are referring to the fact that it is a collection of servers. The reason we call it cloud is because this servers or these servers basically they're based maybe somewhere else at your vendor's place and they are hosting your data, your applications on those data centers or on those servers. As we move further, I would be talking about these pointers in a little more detail and we would be discussing quite a few pointers. So you'd have a clearer picture as to how these softwares or how these applications are hosted and stuff like that. Also, we have quite a few videos on our YouTube channel, that is Edureka's YouTube channel. You can refer those videos as well to understand cloud computing a little more. But by now, I believe the basic definition of cloud computing and an on-premise architecture is clear to you people. So let us just move further and start comparing these two pointers, and probably you'd understand these pointers in a little more detail while doing that as well. So let's start by comparing these two aspects based on the cost. So first we have our on-premise architecture. These are the pointers we need to understand. We are talking about heavy upfront costs and high maintenance cost. Now, if you go back to the definition which I put forth when it comes to on-premise, these are the pointers I did mention there. You'd be taking care of all your servers, you'd be buying a stack of servers, you'd be buying softwares, licensed softwares, right? So all these things are very costly. If you talk about buying a stack of servers, it is really, really costly. Plus, when I said you have to hire people to maintain, monitor, and do all these things, yes, I meant it. And these people, again, these resources are costly, right? So even the maintenance of your software actually becomes very costly. But if you compare it with cloud, this particular approach is comparatively different. Here we are talking about cheaper upfront costs, and it is easy to predict the costs over time. Now, when I said it has cheaper upfront costs, the thing is you actually go ahead and sign up with your vendor. Once the deal is done as to what are your expectations and what you expect out of your vendor, you can decide how much hardware you want to use, how much hardware you don't want to use, what are your requirements, what kind of softwares you want to use. And when you talk about platforms, they give you various services that help you maintain your applications and your data. This basically results in lesser cost when it comes to maintaining your data. The other thing is it is cheaper because if you need to scale up, you can actually decide how much servers you want, and you can start with lesser amount of servers as well. So it is again affordable. This is another scenario which I would like to talk about. Again, when you talk about maintaining your softwares on premise, it becomes a costly affair. Why? Because you have to put in a lot of thought process. As I've mentioned, you'd be buying your own softwares, own servers, and stuff like that. So servers, as I've mentioned, are costly. And the other thing is when you try to buy servers or buy some storage and stuff like that, after it being costly, there are other things that you also need to consider, like how much space do you actually need? I mean, you might wonder that I need maybe 20 petabytes of space. But with time, probably when you move further, you need more space or you need lesser space as well. So buying or booking in that much amount of resources won't be a valid or a wise choice. Why? If you underuse those resources, you're paying more money upfront. And if you need to probably scale up, your on-premise architecture might not be that flexible to actually go ahead and just scale up. If there are any updates that are needed, you might be required to actually replace your software and your hardware as well. So it becomes a completely costly affair when it comes to the pricing part. But when you talk about computing in general, that is cloud computing, what happens is your prices are fairly low here. Why? Because you follow a model called as pay as you go model. That means you'd be paying only for the resources that you use and only for the time duration you use. When you talk about GCP, AWS, these services, these are popular cloud service providers or vendors is what I should say. These vendors actually charge you on hourly basis, even on minute basis. I mean, if you're using a particular service for 15 minutes, you'd be charged only for that time duration. So yes, it is just like using electricity. You'd be paying only for the units you consume and for the time duration you consume those units for. So when it comes to pricing, cloud computing has an upper edge. Let's talk about security. When you talk about security, people are still pretty much in favor of on-premise architecture. Let's try to understand why. When I say people, it is certain group of people or organizations that are in favor of on-premise architecture. Owner manages security when it comes to on-premise architecture, and quality boils down to owner experience. So when I say owner manages it, that means owner actually takes care of quite a few factors like what compliance policies they want, what kind of security they want to implement, and most importantly, all the data resides in-house. So you aren't worried about factors like missing out on data, losing out on data, some downtime which you might face when it comes to your third party vendors or your cloud computing platform. Let's talk about cloud computing a little and then probably see what one suits your needs better. When you talk about cloud computing, there is vendor dependence, and owners are expected to give control to the vendor. Now, what do I mean by this? Your data would be residing at a data center. There are various data centers that these cloud service providers provide you with. If you talk about Amazon Web Services, these data centers are decided or taken care of based on locations. I mean, there are data centers in USA, there are data centers in India. They've started with data centers in China as well. So when you talk about these data centers are like multiple data centers in one city, And those multiple data centers are called as availability zones. So your data would reside on these data centers. And the fact that you do not know who you're sharing your data with, so what happens is probably you would be sharing your data with some other company, maybe a competitor. Amazon would not want to share their data with a company like Flipkart, which is a popular Indian e-commerce company. So that is how it works, right? So when you talk about cloud platforms, what happens is you basically share your resources or you share the space with someone else. What this does is for people who are dealing with services that are very data critical, very security critical, they might refrain from moving to cloud. Yes, these days cloud platforms are very secure, and normally you have proper compliances which ensure that your data stays secure. Even if it resides at a data center, you don't want it to reside. In all, it's all about the kind of security that you're looking for and what kind of business you run. So when I talk about these kind of businesses, they normally wait for others to actually move in. And this is what the trend has seen. I mean, people have been reluctant in moving their data to cloud. Again, if you talk about cloud, yes, it is fairly secure, but it boils down to the preference that people have. Control. We talked about this point in the previous slide as well. You can see owners manage security. When I talk about cloud computing, the control is basically given to the vendor, right? So let's try to understand these pointers from the controlling perspective rather. So these are the pointers that are there when you talk about both cloud computing and on-premise. When I say on-premise, we are talking about more control over implementation, but more time to set up. If you talk about cloud computing, it is easier to implement and it takes less time to set up. Let me throw a little more light on these pointers. When I say more control on implementation, well, what happens is you have more control on quite a few factors because you're planning your own architecture, right? You decide what softwares you want to use, what kind of servers or how much space you want to use, and how do you actually want to go ahead and set up your architecture. So you have more control in that aspect when it comes to security as well, because you'll be purchasing your licensed softwares. Plus, what this does is the fact that you're putting in so much planning, you would be needing more time to set this architecture or infrastructure up. But cloud, on the other hand, the fact that it does not give you more control, but it gives you some other features here. It is easy to implement. I mean, when you talk about cloud computing, suppose I wish to use a number of servers, I can just go ahead and spawn those servers right away. I'd not have to worry about actually going ahead and setting up factors like putting up my servers, having various virtualization layers, putting up various operating systems on top of that, putting my data on top of that. I'd not have to go through all these things. I just go ahead and spawn few instances, few servers, and my application is up and running. So it has less time to set up. But if you talk about overall control, your on-premise architecture would give you more control. When it comes to cloud computing, you're kind of dependent on some factors with your vendor. Flexibility. Now let's talk about this pointer. So again, these are the pointers that one needs to compare. On-premise, it says more customization and flexibility is available. To some extent, in certain features, definitely there is more customization and flexibility available. When I say customization and flexibility, it is about defining your security laws. It is about defining how the data gets retrieved and stuff like that. Plus, there are less updation issues because you have your own softwares and you maintain it on your own. There is one drawback here. You have to update your own softwares. You have to stay updated with the market on your own. So that requires more monitoring and more resources, but you are free to choose the kind of software and stuff you want to do. Now, same is applicable to cloud as well. You are given quite a few options, but again, these things are vendor specific. But these days, what we see is no matter what kind of software you're talking about, integration has become a lot more easier. So this point might not be that valid. I mean, I won't totally agree to the fact that there are more customizations and flexibility with on-premise. I'd rather say that cloud platforms these days are more flexible. And why is that? Because when it comes to overall ease with which you can carry out computing, it is easier with cloud platforms. Whether you talk about analytics, software development, whether you talk about artificial intelligence, having your marketing data, no matter what kind of process are you talking about, cloud computing has services these days that help you perform these tasks in a much better manner. So it pretty much boils down to, I mean, what suits your needs better. As I've already mentioned, if there are certain compliances where you cannot compromise or your company cannot compromise, again, you can go for your on-premise architecture. But if you ask to me in person about the flexibility part, I personally feel that cloud platforms these days are more flexible. Guys, I've already mentioned that we would be talking about the domains which I've just mentioned. But I felt that there were certain other pointers where we could have a proper discussion or something that normally are the pointers that get neglected. So let's just go ahead and talk about those as well. Getting your data back, guys. Now, this is an important point. When you talk about cloud platforms being cheaper, yes, cloud platforms are cheaper, but there have been instances where people have been stuck with certain issues, guys. Say, for example, you have proprietary data. If that data is on your cloud platform, getting that data can be a little tougher. Why? Because you have to write custom queries to do that. There have to be certain custom requests. And cloud computing or cloud platforms, when there was a point saying that cloud platform is not that flexible. It is very flexible when it comes to scalability, monitoring, maintenance, security, and all those things. But the place where it isn't flexible is this part. If you talk about certain compliances or certain agreements, your cloud platforms would be rigid there. So getting in your data can be a difficult task. Why? Because it follows a particular pattern. I mean, when you talk about cloud vendors, they give you certain choices, as in this is the package which you can go for. So when you talk about customizing certain requests, if something comes out of the blue, then if your cloud vendor is not adept enough to go ahead and process those requests right away, you'd probably have to go ahead and be a premium member and then expect that you won't be charged heavily there. Because probably retrieving your proprietary data can be a difficult task at times. Not just difficult task, it can be a costlier affair. So when you actually do go ahead and sign up or sign in your compliance rights or your agreements, you have to be careful there, deciding as in how much freedom do you want your vendors to have, and how much as a customer you yourself should have the freedom when it comes to certain policies, and how flexible are those policies. So if those compliances are in place, probably you won't be facing this problem. But otherwise, getting your data back can be a difficult task. Deployment and outages. We talked about cloud platforms not being that secure. These days, cloud platforms are fairly secure. What they do is they follow more of a hybrid kind of security model where it is called as shared security model. Vendor and the customer, they come to terms as in, okay, these are the security principles we would be following. This ensures that there is more security. But when you talk about an on-premise architecture, it is more secure in this perspective because even if the outages are low, when you talk about a cloud platform, what happens is basically these outages, even if little, they might make you stay stuck because if your data is with cloud platforms and there is an outage, you are at a vendor's mercy. This is where the problem comes in. But if you talk about overall deployment, cloud platforms ensure one other thing, which is good with these platforms. Deployment becomes easier. It is easier to set up your continuous integration and deployment pipelines. So if it is the case of speeding up your process, it becomes very fast with your cloud platforms. And if it comes to upgrading to a newer version, to a newer software, or to more space and more computation power, it again becomes easier with your cloud platforms. So even if there are any outages, those are less in number. But one thing that you need to take care of, if your agreement with your cloud service vendors is not up to the mark, your data might be at risk. So the initial phase where you actually go ahead and set in your policies with your vendor, you need to be careful at that juncture. And if you do that, you would be in a much better space to actually go ahead and harness the power of cloud computing. Country regulations. Now, this is another important thing. For people who reside in particular countries that are conservative or reserved when it comes to allowing your data to be placed in some other country, you might be at a problem. As I've already mentioned, your data resides or might reside at different locations or in different geographical locations. Yes, you are free to choose your location, but if you wish your data to reside in some other country, probably make sure that your country regulations support that, and then go ahead and actually pick a cloud vendor. These are some of the pointers that I actually wanted to talk about. As far as this session goes, I believe I've covered most of the pointers, guys. I mean, we've talked about different domains, we've talked about security, cost, we've talked about various other factors, flexibility and control as well. As far as this session goes, guys, I wanted to focus on these pointers only. Now, I would be resting this session here and here. Before I do that, I would like to mention a point that if you did like this video, go ahead and hit the like button. And if you wish to stay subscribed or if you wish to get access to more such videos, you can stay subscribed to our YouTube channel and you can hit the bell icon to get notified instantly because we publish new content every day, guys. Having said that, I would be resting my session here and here. Thank you. Bye-bye.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!